He didn't attack Charlie Kirk. He attacked Trump. I'm not here to defend what Jimmy Kimmel said. I'm talking about proportionality. I think many people are blaming the wrong entity and the wrong people for what has happened. As the host of a show that was suspended indefinitely called Live PD, this show is not coming back. So I have been getting a lot of calls to make appearances to discuss what has happened with Jimmy Kimmel. And I have said no to all of them because I wanted to save it to share it with all of you, to really dig in with all of you and get some time to explain what I think about what's happened with Jimmy Kimmel and why. And here's the big picture point. I think many people are blaming the wrong entity and the wrong people for what has happened. I'll get to that in a moment. Well, let's start with what Kimmel actually said, okay? Because this is important. And if you've been following news of this, I'm sure you've heard this already, but it is important to play the entire 1 minute and 1 second clip because this is the reason that you have the reaction. So I think we should play it, and then I'm going to talk about my reaction. This is number 2.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty.
Yes. He's at the 4th stage of grief, construction. Demolition, construction. This is not how an adult grieves the murder of someone he called a friend. This is how a 4-year-old mourns a goldfish.
Let's start with what the biggest problem was in what Kimmel said. The biggest problem is he got it wrong. He got it wrong. Bad timing for him that we got more information the next day about Tyler Robinson that sure seems to indicate that he was not, quote, one of them. But it seems that portion is what has sent people into la-la land over this. How dare he? And I have to tell you, I don't think that what he said is such a big deal. I think he got it wrong. And for that, maybe they would have had him apologize and say, I was wrong to say it was one of them. But the president's answer to that question about Charlie Kirk was ridiculous. So it's not insulting to the memory of Charlie Kirk to make fun of that answer. So a little bit of this is Kimmel's fault, right? For going too far. There was no evidence that this guy was one of them. A lot of people were saying, oh, he's a Nick Fuentes follower. He's a groiper, Dan. You're confusing a groiper with a left-winger. It said, look, again, the evidence as we currently know it still seems to point to the fact that he viewed Charlie Kirk as a hateful guy, and that's why he did what he did. And he was not one of them, okay? But here's the problem with that. It is exactly that kind of language that was used by Don Jr., Senator Mike Lee, Elon Musk, after the Minnesota shootings. I mean, the fact that we're making it, how dare he say incorrectly it was one of them? Mike Lee wrote, this is what happens when Marxists don't get their way. Marxism is a deadly mental illness. Elon Musk shared a post that claiming the left was responsible for the Minnesota shootings and a string of other crimes. The far left is murderously violent, he said, in the wake of the Minnesota shootings, where we now know that this guy was a vehemently anti-abortion guy who was a Trump supporter. Now, in both these cases, there's going to be some nuance. in their motivations. In both these cases, it seems that they were not affiliated with a specific political party. And in neither case should it really matter in the sense that people shouldn't be implicating broader groups because of what one person is doing. I mean, far-right activist Laura Loomer claimed that Governor Walz was friends with the suspect and called for the governor to be detained by the FBI and interrogated, and yet she remains a key Trump ally. And yet this comment by Jimmy Kimmel was deemed to be so horrible that the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, went on a podcast with a right-wing podcaster called The Benny Show, and he started to make threats. This is before anyone takes action on what happened. But this is FCC Chairman Brendan Carr's reaction. This is number 4 to what I just played you from Jimmy Kimmel.
You know, when you look at the conduct that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible. As you've indicated, there are, avenues here for the FCC. So there are some ways in which I need to be a little bit careful, because we could be called ultimately to be a judge on some of these claims that come up. But I don't think this is an isolated incident.
The sickest conduct? What you just heard right there is some of the sickest conduct? Again, I'm okay. Look, there are a lot of people who are reasonable people out there who are criticizing Jimmy Kimmel. I get that. I'm not here to defend what Jimmy Kimmel said. I'm talking about proportionality. I'm talking about the fact that this isn't the first time we've heard people talk this way. And then the threats start, right? It's like, well, I have to be very careful. I have to be very careful. But then he decides he's not going to be so careful. And this is number 5 from the FCC chairman.
And they have a license granted by us at the FCC, and that comes with it an obligation to operate in the public interest. And we can get into some ways that we've been trying to reinvigorate the public interest and some changes that we've seen. But frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
All right. So right there, you've got it. He's now made the threat. He's making the threat. All right. And he goes on in the interview talking about their actions we can take, et cetera. At the end, and let's play number 8. This is him continuing to talk about how serious an issue this is.
At the end of the day, if we do get called upon to cast a vote on this, Disney will have a chance to put in their arguments and explain it. But this is a very, very serious issue right now for Disney.
It shouldn't be a serious issue for Disney, but the FCC chairman made it a serious issue for Disney. So when I heard the news yesterday and people immediately started blaming Disney and ABC for caving, my first reaction was, well, wait a sec. Why aren't you blaming the FCC chairman? Why aren't you blaming the government, this administration, for making these threats? I mean, look, it's very easy for those of us on the sidelines to say this is shameful and this is we're giving up a free press and all of that. I get it. But I also get it from a Disney business perspective. And it's not Disney who made this decision. It was Sinclair and it was Nexstar, 2 of the largest groups that own stations, including a lot of ABC stations. And Nexstar in particular has a big merger that they're trying to move forward with Tegna, where they need FCC approval. They need them to approve not just the merger, but a change in what the typical rules are for how many stations, et cetera, a particular entity can own. So Nexstar was actually the first one to cave, and they issued a statement saying, Mr. Kimmel's comments about the death of Mr. Kirk are offensive and insensitive at a critical time in the national discourse. We don't believe they reflect the spectrum of opinions, views, or values of the local communities in which they're located. Continuing to give Mr. Kimmel a broadcast platform in the communities we serve is simply not in the public interest at this time. And we've made the difficult decision to preempt his show in an effort to let cooler heads prevail as we move towards the resumption of respectful, constructive dialogue. Look, they're only thinking about the merger here. And I get it from a business perspective, right? But Sinclair went even further in trying to suck up to the Trump administration. Sinclair, the nation's largest ABC affiliate group, objects to recent comments made by Mr. Kimmel concerning the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Sinclair also calls upon Mr. Kimmel to issue a direct apology to the Kirk family. Why does he owe an apology to the Kirk family? I mean, you can say he owes an apology to the people who he was impugning. I've heard some people say that Kimmel was suggesting that somehow Charlie Kirk brought this upon himself. I didn't hear that. I heard him saying that they're individuals who are using this for political gain, and from his perspective, falsely and wrongly so. And they announced that regardless of ABC's plans, Sinclair intends not to return the Jimmy Kimmel Show to our air until we're confident that the appropriate steps have been taken to uphold the standards of a national broadcast platform. Now, Disney gave a much more measured statement, simply saying it'll be preempted indefinitely, and that's it, talking about what's going to air in its place. Now, let me tell you, as the host of a show that was suspended indefinitely called Live PD, that this show is not coming back. It's not coming back. I remember when Live PD got suspended, we were told, oh, it's just a suspension. So we're not canceling it. We're just suspending it. And of course, it was clear to me from early on that it was being canceled. And I was upset about it. And I went on shows and announced that I disagreed with the decision. And I've been fortunate enough now that we have got a new show called On Patrol Live, just come back. But that show, the Kimmel Show, is not coming back. Kimmel getting booted, suspended, whatever you want to call it, for falsely saying, and I do believe it's false, falsely saying that this guy was one of them. You tell me if this is so different from what Don Jr. said in the wake, this is number 21, in the wake of the Minnesota shootings, when evidence was still coming in and it was looking like he had a list of abortion providers and Democrats in his car, in addition to some other things. But again, you want to take a careful approach? Fine. This is what Don Jr. said.
Do you have any thoughts on political violence and or the political rhetoric in this country? You know what happened in Minnesota recently, but of course your family is familiar with threats and political threats.
Listen, my father's been shot at. I've been tried to, the other side has tried jailing me. They talk a lot about, the rhetoric and the violence, and yet it seems to be mostly caused by them. The 2020 summer of love did not seem like a summer of love. The politicians at high-level places encouraging people to attack my father did not seem fair. If Republicans were doing that, they'd be thrown in jail. When a Democrat does it, it's to preserve democracy. You don't think everybody's got to tune it down a little bit or turn it down a little bit? Listen, I think what we have to actually do, I would love to see all of that turned down, but I think I'm seeing it come from the left. Everyone talks about Minnesota, but they don't talk about the guy seems to be a leftist. It's a Minnesota politician, or guy who was appointed by the Democrat governor, vice presidential candidate for the Democrat Party, Tim Walz. The guy that committed those atrocities this weekend is a Democrat.
Not true. Wasn't appointed by Walz, wasn't a Democrat. And in fact, the people who know him say he would be absolutely offended by being called a Democrat. And the people who know him have made it clear that he was very anti-abortion, which shows you, again, remember, it wasn't just one Democratic lawmaker who was shot and their spouse. It was two. Only one died, meaning a couple died, but then he went to another house of another Democrat. What happened to Don Jr. for saying that? Nothing. Don Jr. was wrong. I didn't even mention that until now, meaning it's not like at the time that happened, I said, oh my goodness, can you believe Don Jr. saying? I was just like, yeah, he's just saying stuff that isn't true. So Senator Mike Lee, so's Elon Musk. Okay, I didn't even talk about it on the show. That's what Kimmel's done. He got it wrong. Should he have said that? No. Is it, the amount of the vitriol and the, this is the worst thing ever. And remember, and again, I haven't even heard this one, but I want to hear it. This is Kimmel a few days earlier talking about the Charlie Kirk story and some of the responses to it. This is number 3.
The second largest city in our bitterly divided nation, where, like the rest of the country, we're still trying to wrap our heads around the senseless murder of the popular podcaster and conservative activist Charlie Kirk yesterday, whose death has amplified our anger, our differences. And I've seen a lot of extraordinarily vile responses to this from both sides of the political spectrum. Some people are cheering this, which is something I won't ever understand. And we had another school shooting yesterday in Colorado, the 100th one of the year. And with all these terrible things happening, you would think that our president will at least make an attempt to bring us together. But he didn't. President Obama did. President Biden did. Presidents Bush and Clinton did. President Trump did not. Instead, he blamed Democrats for their rhetoric. The man who told a crowd of supporters that maybe the Second Amendment people should do something about Hillary Clinton. The man who said he wouldn't mind if someone shot through the fake news media. The man who unleashed a mob on the Capitol and said Liz Cheney should face 9 barrels shooting at her for supporting his opponent blames the radical left for their rhetoric.
Whether you agree with Kimmel or not, he's criticizing Trump. He was very clear in denouncing the people cheering Charlie Kirk's death. So does context not matter at all anymore? And now you have the FCC chairman, of course, celebrating. Trump is celebrating the effective firing of Jimmy Kimmel. And now, by the way, Sinclair media is demanding that Jimmy Kimmel donate to Turning Point USA. He didn't attack Charlie Kirk. He attacked Trump. He got it wrong about who killed Charlie Kirk. And you can say that he is insulting some of the people on that side of the aisle. Okay. But talking about this being one of the worst and it's our obligation to uphold the public interest. And now you have the FCC chairman basically saying that they're not done yet, that they're going to continue to put this kind of pressure. So when thinking about who's to blame here, right, it's the FCC chairman, first and foremost, most important person. Kimmel deserves a little bit of blame, saying something he shouldn't have said because it was wrong, but no more offensive than what Elon Musk or Senator Lee or others have said. And then it's the station groups. It's the Nexstars and Sinclairs who pulled the plug to appease Trump. And here we are.